So I was just talking about, in another video, about, well, how language can't talk about itself. You know, I mean, the eye can't see itself, the knife can't cut itself. Language can't talk about itself. Language is about something else. That division is in the structure of language, in the fact, the existence of language. What it is includes that paradox, that it can't talk about itself. So it always leaves itself out of what it says. And that's kind of what's been a problem for philosophy and for, well, humans from the beginning, is this little contradiction, this paradox, and this, well, I mean, that's the essence of duality, of division. Language makes like a hole in something that it's sick, it's, you know, a place that it stays, this unseen, undescribed, the blind spot, essentially, in everything that's known, everything that's talked about. And that's kind of what's referred to when we say there's no me. We're kind of referring to that, pointing to that, because me essentially is the one with language and knowing, and I mean, it's sort of a creation of language in a way. You could say that. Me is the one who knows that I'm real, and the world knows what the world is, knows what experience is. But I know it in terms of my knowledge, and I know it in terms of language. This language that excludes itself from what it says. And essentially, me is this experience that I am what I say, or I am what I know, in a sense, what I say to myself. To myself. Again, that's that paradox of the person, me, is talking to myself, creating another person. When I say me, I'm including this other person, the one that I talk to, in my thinking and in my knowing. Well, that's creating a reality, and that reality is not what is. This is what's being pointed to here. It's that reality, the me reality, this created reality, language reality, whatever, that can't recognize itself, can't talk about itself, can't know itself. Of course, knowledge is always of something. And again, this is what is always pointed to in non-duality, and why the language of non-duality kind of never really adds up and doesn't really make sense or mean anything. Because it's not really playing the game. It's not playing the language game, of course. I mean, it is, and it isn't. That's the specialness of this really, all of this communication. And why it's very typically noticed that it doesn't make sense, or it even just sounds crazy. Well, yeah, it is, in terms of language. But we're also pointing out that, well, actually it's the language that's a little crazy, because it's creating this whole world that's projecting outside of itself, and just assuming that projection is something called reality, even though it's obvious it's even left itself out of the picture to begin with. Well, so this is pointing to what is, doesn't do that. It doesn't have that structure of removal, of separation. It's just made up. That's what the me is. And this reality that I'm experiencing as my life, is really this artificial business. And it doesn't include itself. It doesn't include what is. So everything I know about me, everything I know about reality, everything I experience as what is not what is. What is, you could say the me, the person, those words don't work. What is what I am without that exclusion business. In other words, what language is, and I started out saying language can't talk about itself. Language can't see itself. It can't refer to itself. Which means it can't refer to anything real. It can't refer to what is. Because the what is of language is the what is. The self of language, let's say, is the self of what is, the self of me. What is, in other words. So what is what is. It's not part of this mechanism of excluding or telling a story. Well, that's the problem with the story. We're always talking about story. No, the me experience is just a story. It's not what is. Well, the story leaves out itself. You could essentially, I mean, that's what I'm talking, the language tells the story, but it tells the story as if it is not part of the story. As if it's some kind of alien observer. And a perfect observer, right? That's why it's called reality, because the story is equated with what is real. Well, perfectly known to be real. I mean, there's a flaw in that system, but that flaw doesn't need to be dealt with. It doesn't need to be done. There's nothing you need to do about it. It's already not happening. There just is this. There just is what is. It's not a matter of language. Good, because language, again, can't say anything about what is. There is no about what is. There's nothing outside of what is to say it's. And that's what is. And what is fulfilled and complete and not missing all the things that me is looking for. Because again, as I'm always saying, me is just this energy, this activity of looking for. Well, you could say it's very similar to this. It is really the same dynamic of language not being able to talk about itself, always referring to something that it's referring, it's something other. Well, that's the me. And this story of what's happening, what's going on, what it is just a mechanism of excluding itself. That's a funny way to say it. But that's why it's looking for itself. You could say. The me is this energy of looking for what's missing, looking for that piece that, that runaway part of myself. So in a sense, language is doing that too. Language is always trying to say more and more, trying to say it. But it's just kind of trying to get to the it that would include the language. Well, of course. It has to include everything to be it, to what is. So that's the what is we talk about. That's why it doesn't, in a sense, this phrase what is, or this, or whatever these words are, they're trying not to be language. In other words, trying not to have that limitation. Of course they do, because it is language, but that's why they're not really ordinary words. in the ordinary sense. At least that's, it's kind of the idea anyway. I don't know.